Mazda mechanics never share this publicly. There are 15 specific actions that separate a Mazda with 80,000 miles on a junkyard flatbed from one with 300,000 miles still pulling highway duty. None of them require expensive tools. None require dealership visits. Every single one costs less than a single car payment. Miss just one, and the engine starts a countdown you cannot stop. Here is the complete list. Number 15. Change your oil. Every 5,000 miles. Every Mazda engine built after 2000 uses an aluminum block with steel cylinder sleeves. Aluminum expands under heat faster than steel. That expansion differential creates microscopic clearances between the piston rings and cylinder walls that only fresh, correctly viscous oil can fill. When oil degrades past 5,000 miles, the base stock molecules break down and lose their film strength. Metal contacts metal across those clearances at thousands of cycles per minute. The one thing you must do is establish an oil change schedule tied to a calendar date rather than a mileage reminder. Mileage reminders fail when driving patterns change. A calendar reminder executes regardless of how many miles you drove that month. Set a recurring 6-week calendar alert, check the mileage. If you have covered 5,000 miles, change the oil immediately. If you have covered 3,000 miles on short city trips, change it anyway. Short trip driving never allows the engine to reach full operating temperature, meaning fuel dilution and condensation accumulate in the oil faster than highway miles do. City drivers should change oil every 4,000 miles regardless of what the dashboard monitor recommends. Your oil interval determines everything downstream. But number 2 reveals the one coolant habit that quietly cracks engine blocks while owners sleep. Number 14. Flush your coolant. Every 30,000 miles, using only Mazda. FL22. Fluid. Mazda Skyactiv engines require FL22 long-life coolant exclusively. This is not a suggestion buried in fine print. It is a metallurgical necessity. The aluminum alloy used in Skyactiv cylinder heads contains specific magnesium and silicon content that reacts chemically with conventional green coolant. Standard ethylene glycol coolant turns acidic as its inhibitor package depletes. Acidic coolant attacks aluminum aggressively, pitting the cooling passages and eroding the water pump impeller blades from the inside. Let's talk about Teresa. Teresa bought a used 2017 CX-5 with 60,000 miles. The previous owner had topped off the coolant reservoir with universal green coolant twice because the level kept dropping slowly. Teresa noticed nothing unusual for 18 months. Then her engine overheated on a Tuesday morning commute. The mechanic found a pinhole leak in the aluminum coolant passage caused by electrolytic corrosion. The repair required a partial engine disassembly costing $1,100. The FL22 coolant that would have prevented this cost $22 per gallon. The flush procedure matters as much as the fluid choice. A simple drain and fill leaves approximately 30% of the old fluid trapped in the block passages and heater core. Performing 2 consecutive drain and fill cycles with distilled water between them displaces the contaminated fluid effectively. Never use tap water in a Mazda cooling system. Tap water contains dissolved minerals that deposit on aluminum surfaces as scale, reducing heat transfer efficiency and blocking narrow coolant passages over time. Distilled water costs $1 per gallon and protects a $4,000 engine. Coolant corrosion works silently for months before striking. Number 3 exposes the transmission fluid myth that dealerships use to destroy gearboxes after the warranty expires. If this video is keeping your Mazda alive, smash the like button right now and share this with every Mazda owner you know. The next tip is the single most important item on this entire list. Number 13. Drain and fill your transmission fluid. Every 40,000 miles. Mazda's marketing materials describe the automatic transmission fluid as a lifetime fill. This claim is engineered to make the car appear cheaper to own on paper during the purchase decision. Lifetime means the fluid lasts as long as the transmission lasts under ideal laboratory conditions. Real driving is not a laboratory. Stop-and-go traffic, trailer towing, mountain grades, and aggressive acceleration all generate heat that degrades transmission fluid chemistry far faster than the marketing assumption accounts for. The critical rule for Mazda automatics is drain and fill only. Never perform a high-pressure flush on a Mazda automatic transmission. High-pressure flushing machines force new fluid backward through the hydraulic circuit under pressure. This dislodges accumulated metal particles and varnish deposits from the valve body passages and suspends them in the fluid. Those particles then circulate through the precision-machined solenoid valves, scoring the valve bores and causing erratic shift behavior. A drain and fill removes approximately 60% of the fluid volume without disturbing settled deposits. 3 consecutive drain and fill cycles separated by 500 miles. Each removes over 90% of degraded fluid safely. Use only Mazda-specified ATF fluid. The Skyactiv Drive 6-speed automatic requires Mazda Genuine A TFFZ fluid. Substituting a universal compatible fluid introduces friction modifier chemistry that conflicts with Mazda's clutch pack material specification. The transmission may shift acceptably for 20,000 miles before the incompatible chemistry glazes the clutch surfaces permanently. Keep the fluid clean with correct specifications fluid, and the SkyActiv drive will shift with factory precision past 250,000 miles. Clean fluid saves gearboxes, but number 4 targets something sitting on top of your engine right now that is slowly starving every cylinder of clean air. Number 12. Inspect your air filter every 15,000 miles and replace it without hesitation. The SkyActiv G engine's 14:1 compression ratio is only achievable when the intake charge is precisely metered by the mass airflow sensor. A dirty air filter restricts the volume of air entering the intake manifold, forcing the engine management computer to reduce fuel delivery proportionally to maintain the correct air-fuel ratio. The engine produces less power, burns more fuel per mile, and runs the combustion chamber hotter because the restricted charge density reduces the cooling effect of the incoming air mass. A contaminated MAF sensor reads airflow inaccurately, causing the computer to miscalculate fuel delivery permanently until the sensor is cleaned or replaced. A replacement MAF sensor costs between $150 and $300. A replacement air filter costs $18. What to do? Inspect the filter element by holding it up to a bright light source. Light should pass through the pleated paper media clearly. If the media appears opaque or gray, replace it immediately regardless of mileage. Dusty driving environments, gravel roads, and construction zones load filters far faster than highway commuting. Owners in arid climates should inspect filters every 10,000 miles. The OEM Mazda air filter uses a specific pleat density matched to the intake resonance frequency of the SkyActiv engine. Aftermarket high-flow filters increase airflow marginally while allowing larger particle sizes to pass the media and score the cylinder walls over time. Use the OEM specification filter exclusively. A clean filter breathes freely. But number 5 uncovers the spark plug interval that Mazda quietly extended too far, and what that decision costs your ignition coils. Number 11. Replace spark plugs. At 60,000 miles, not 100,000, Mazda specifies iridium spark plugs with a 100,000 mile replacement interval. Iridium electrode material resists erosion exceptionally well and technically survives the full interval under ideal conditions. Real-world SkyActiv engines do not operate under ideal conditions. Short trip driving, ethanol-blended fuel, and oil vapor from the crankcase breather system all accelerate electrode erosion beyond the laboratory rate. By 75,000 miles, the electrode gap on most real-world SkyActiv plugs has grown beyond the specified range. The installation procedure requires one critical step that most owners skip. Apply a thin, even coat of anti-seize compound to the plug threads before installation. Mazda uses aluminum cylinder heads. Steel spark plug threads gall against aluminum under repeated thermal cycling over 60,000 miles. Plugs seized in aluminum heads strip the thread insert during removal, requiring a costly helicoil repair. Anti-seize prevents galling completely. Torque the plugs to the factory specification using a calibrated torque wrench. Under-torqued plugs back out under combustion pressure. Over-torqued plugs stretch and break during the next removal. The factory specification is 25 Nm for all current SkyActiv applications. Fresh plugs protect your coils. Number 6 targets the one brake fluid habit that turns a simple pedal press into a life-threatening moment of nothing. Number 10. Replace brake fluid every 2 years, regardless of mileage. Brake fluid is hygroscopic. It absorbs moisture from the atmosphere continuously through microscopic permeation of the rubber brake hoses and reservoir cap seal. Fresh DOT3 brake fluid has a dry boiling point of approximately 205 degrees Celsius. After 2 years of moisture absorption in a typical climate, the water content reaches 3% by volume. 3% water contamination drops the effective boiling point to approximately 140 degrees Celsius. Mazda brake calipers on sport specification models reach internal temperatures exceeding 160 degrees Celsius during sustained downhill braking or repeated hard stops from highway speed. Brake fluid at that temperature boils inside the caliper piston bore. Boiled fluid creates compressible vapor bubbles in the hydraulic circuit. The brake pedal travels to the floor against vapor rather than transmitting pressure to the caliper piston. This is brake fade caused entirely by neglected fluid, and it occurs without warning at the worst possible moment. Testing brake fluid moisture content takes 90 seconds with a digital brake fluid tester available for $15 online. Insert the probe into the reservoir and read the display. Anything above 1.5% water content requires immediate flushing. The flush procedure requires bleeding each caliper in sequence from the furthest point from the master cylinder to the nearest. Use a hand vacuum pump at each bleeder valve to draw fresh fluid through the circuit until the fluid runs clear and bubble-free. Total fluid required is approximately 1 liter. Total cost is approximately $25. Total time is 45 minutes. The cost of failing brakes on a mountain descent is incalculable. Clean brake fluid saves lives. But number 7 exposes the differential fluid secret that destroys all-wheel drive, CX-5 and CX-9 rear axles silently at highway speed. Number 9. Service your rear differential fluid every 30,000 miles. On AWD models, Mazda's all-wheel drive system uses an electronically controlled rear differential coupling unit that transfers torque to the rear axle during wheel slip events. The coupling unit contains a wet clutch pack bathed in a specific low-viscosity coupling fluid. This fluid performs two functions simultaneously. It lubricates the clutch pack friction surfaces and transfers heat away from the coupling housing during engagement events. The fluid degrades from both heat and mechanical shear stress across the clutch pack interface. Owners of AWD CX-5 and CX-9 models almost universally ignore rear differential service. The service point is located underneath the vehicle and is not visible during routine inspection. Dealerships rarely flag it during service appointments. By 60,000 miles in a vehicle driven in winter conditions or on unpaved roads, the coupling fluid becomes dark, metallic contaminated, and viscous. The clutch pack engagement becomes sluggish. The system engages late during wheel slip events, allowing excessive front wheel spin before rear torque delivery occurs. The delayed engagement loads the clutch pack with high differential speed, generating intense heat that glazes the friction surfaces permanently. A glazed rear coupling unit requires complete replacement, costing between $800 and $1,500. A fluid service costs $40 and takes 30 minutes. The drain plug is located on the bottom of the coupling housing. Use only Mazda-specified rear differential fluid. Universal gear oils contain sulfur-based extreme pressure additives that react with the copper alloy components inside the coupling mechanism, causing corrosion that destroys the precision-bearing surfaces. Keep the coupling fluid clean, and the AWD system delivers confident all-weather traction past 200,000 miles without mechanical intervention. AWD systems fail silently. Before we go further, if this information is saving your Mazda's life, hit the subscribe button right now. Every single tip from here forward gets more specific, more technical, and more valuable. Number 8. Clean your throttle body every 30,000 miles. The Skyactiv G engine uses an electronic throttle body mounted directly on the intake manifold. The throttle plate rotates on a precision shaft inside a machined aluminum bore. The crankcase ventilation system routes oil vapor from the engine back into the intake manifold upstream of the throttle body. This oil vapor condenses on the throttle plate edges and shaft area as carbon-laden deposits that accumulate gradually with every operating cycle. By 30,000 miles, deposit buildup restricts the throttle bore opening at idle. The engine management computer commands the throttle plate to open further to compensate, recalibrating the idle air control baseline upward. The throttle position sensor stores this recalibrated baseline as the new closed position reference. When the deposits eventually break loose unevenly during hard acceleration, the throttle plate position no longer matches the sensor reference, causing erratic idle fluctuation, stalling at traffic lights, and hesitation during light throttle transitions. Cleaning the throttle body requires removing the intake air duct, spraying throttle body cleaner onto a lint-free cloth, and wiping the bore and plate surfaces clean. Never spray cleaner directly into the throttle body on a running engine. Direct spray flooding overwhelms the oxygen sensor and can hydrolock the engine if excess fluid enters the cylinder. After cleaning, the throttle body requires a relearn procedure. Disconnect the battery negative terminal for 15 minutes. Reconnect, start the engine, and allow it to idle undisturbed for 10 minutes without touching the accelerator pedal. The computer reestablishes the correct idle baseline against the clean throttle bore automatically. A clean throttle body idles perfectly. Number 9 targets the cabin filter that most Mazda owners never knew existed until the air conditioning started smelling like a wet basement. Number 7. Replace your cabin air filter every 15,000 miles. The cabin air filter sits behind the glove box on every Mazda built after 2003. It filters all air entering the passenger compartment through the climate control system. A clogged cabin filter restricts airflow across the evaporator core, reducing air conditioning or cooling efficiency significantly. The restricted airflow allows condensation to accumulate on the evaporator fins rather than draining away cleanly. Stagnant moisture on the evaporator surface grows mold and bacteria colonies that produce the musty odor that owners mistakenly attribute to an aging air conditioning system. Inspect the removed filter under bright light before disposal. Heavy pollen loading indicates elevated outdoor allergen conditions that warrant more frequent replacement. Dark gray uniform. Loading indicates normal dust accumulation. Black streaks on the filter media indicate road diesel soot entering the intake, suggesting a damaged fresh air intake duct seal that requires inspection before the next filter installation. The filter tells the story of every mile the car has traveled through its loading pattern. Read it carefully and replace it without hesitation. Fresh cabin air protects your evaporator. But number 10 reveals the fuel system habit that Mazda engineers built the Skyactiv engine around, and why ignoring it costs you injectors. Number 6. Use top-tier certified fuel exclusively in every Skyactiv engine. The Skyactiv G engine's combustion chamber geometry is machined to tolerances that require clean, consistent fuel atomization from the port injectors to function correctly. Top-tier certified fuels contain a proprietary detergent additive package that coats the injector tip, intake valve stem, and combustion chamber surfaces with a protective film that prevents carbon deposit formation. Non-certified budget fuels meet minimum legal standards but contain no meaningful detergent additives beyond the regulatory minimum. The intake valve deposit issue is most severe on direct injection Skyactiv engines used in the turbocharged CX-9 and Mazda Speed applications. Direct injection sprays fuel directly into the combustion chamber rather than at the intake valve face. The intake valves receive no fuel washing and accumulate oil vapor, carbon deposits unimpeded. Top-tier fuel cannot solve direct injection valve deposits alone. Those engines require the periodic high RPM highway carbon burning procedure combined with a walnut shell, blasting service every 60,000 miles. Port-injected Skyactiv engines on top-tier fuel develop minimal deposit accumulation and maintain factory injection pattern precision past 150,000 miles without injector service. Clean fuel keeps injectors alive. Number 11 exposes the serpentine belt inspection habit that strands more Mazda owners on highway shoulders than any other single failure. Number 5. Inspect your serpentine belt every 30,000 miles and replace it at 90,000. The serpentine belt drives the alternator, power steering pump, air conditioning compressor, and water pump simultaneously from the crankshaft pulley. On Mazda Skyactiv engines, the water pump is belt-driven externally rather than internally chain-driven as on some competitors. A serpentine belt failure simultaneously disables battery charging, power steering assist, air conditioning, and engine cooling in a single catastrophic moment. The engine overheats within 4 minutes of belt failure at highway speed, warping the aluminum cylinder head and potentially cracking the block. Modern EPDM rubber belts do not crack visibly before failure the way older neoprene belts did. A visually perfect EPDM belt can be within miles of catastrophic failure. The correct inspection method involves twisting the belt 90 degrees under bright light and examining the rib valley surfaces for longitudinal cracking, running parallel to the belt ribs. Any cracking in the rib valleys indicates rubber degradation requiring immediate replacement regardless of mileage. Also inspect all idler and tensioner pulleys by spinning them by hand with the engine off. Any roughness, grinding, or wobble during manual spin indicates bearing failure. A seized idler pulley shreds the belt within seconds of engine startup. Replace the belt, tensioner, and all idler pulleys as a complete set at 90,000 miles. Replacing the belt alone on worn pulleys allows the new belt to ride on damaged bearing surfaces that accelerate wear dramatically. The complete belt and pulley kit costs approximately $90 for most Skyactiv applications. Installing a new belt on a seized tensioner produces a fresh belt failure within 10,000 miles. Replace everything together once, torque the tensioner pivot bolt to specification, and drive with complete confidence for another 90,000 miles. A belt inspection takes 2 minutes and prevents catastrophic overheating, whereas number 12 targets the valve clearance check that Mazda hides deep in the service schedule where most owners never find it. Number 4. Check valve clearances at 100,000 miles on all Skyactiv engines. Skyactiv engines use solid valve lifters rather than hydraulic self-adjusting lifters used in most modern competitors. Solid lifters maintain precise valve timing but require periodic manual clearance measurement and adjustment as the valve seats and stem tips wear over time. Mazda specifies a valve clearance inspection at 100,000 miles for all Skyactiv G engines. Most owners and many independent mechanics overlook this specification because hydraulic lifter engines have made manual valve adjustment nearly obsolete in modern vehicles. Tight valve clearances prevent exhaust valves from seating fully during the compression stroke. A valve that cannot seal allows combustion pressure to escape past the valve face, burning the valve edge and the seat simultaneously. Burned valves cause cylinder misfire, significant power loss, and eventually require cylinder head removal for valve replacement costing between $1,200 and $2,500. The valve clearance check itself requires removing the valve cover and measuring each valve gap with precision feeler gauges. Any clearance outside specification requires shimming the bucket lifter with a replacement shim of corrected thickness. The job requires 2 hours at an independent mechanic familiar with Skyactiv engines and costs approximately $250, including gasket replacement. Owners who perform this service discover whether their specific engine has experienced accelerated seat wear from fuel quality issues or overheating events. An engine with uniform clearances at 100,000 miles demonstrates excellent internal condition and justifies continued investment in maintenance. Document the clearance measurements and present them to future buyers as evidence of thorough mechanical stewardship. It raises the resale value far beyond the $250 service cost. Number 13 reveals the one chassis lubrication habit that transforms a clunking, wandering Mazda back into the precise machine it was on day one. Number 3. Grease your chassis fittings and inspect suspension. Bushings every 40,000 miles. Mazda suspension geometry is engineered to tighter tolerances than most mainstream competitors at equivalent price points. The front double wishbone and rear multi-link suspension layouts use multiple rubber bushings that isolate the aluminum control arms from the steel subframe. These bushings maintain precise wheel alignment geometry throughout the suspension travel range. When bushings harden and crack, often from age and UV exposure, the control arm pivot points develop play that allows the wheel alignment to shift dynamically during braking and cornering. Inspect all visible suspension bushings during every oil change by grabbing each control arm and applying firm force in multiple directions. Any movement beyond the normal elastic deflection of healthy rubber indicates a failed bushing requiring replacement. Simultaneously inspect all steering tie rod ends and ball joints by lifting each front wheel and checking for play in the joint while the wheel is suspended. Any detectable play in a ball joint means the joint is approaching failure. A separated front lower ball joint drops the wheel inward suddenly, causing immediate loss of steering control. Replace any joint showing play before the next drive. Tight suspension geometry makes every mile precise. But number 14 exposes the battery maintenance habit that kills Mazda's sophisticated electronic systems faster than any mechanical failure ever could. Number 2. Test and replace your battery proactively. Every 4 years, modern Mazda vehicles use an intelligent energy management system called iStop, which automatically shuts the engine off at traffic lights and restarts it when the brake pedal releases. This system cycles the battery through microcharge and discharge events dozens of times during a single commute. Standard calcium batteries degrade from this cycling pattern faster than traditional start-stop applications. Mazda specifies an AGM, or enhanced flooded battery, for all iStop-equipped vehicles. Fitting a conventional calcium battery in an iStop, Mazda accelerates battery failure and eventually triggers iStop system faults that require dealer-level diagnostic equipment to reset. A failing battery causes cascading electronic failures that mimic expensive component faults. The Mazda infotainment system loses its configuration settings randomly. The transmission adaptive shift logic resets to a crude factory baseline, causing rough shifts until the computer relearns the driver's patterns over several hundred miles. The iStop system deactivates permanently and stores a fault code. Owners spend hundreds of dollars at dealerships diagnosing these electronic symptoms before a technician identifies a degraded battery as the root cause of every complaint simultaneously. Test the battery with a digital conductance tester every 12 months after the 3rd year of ownership. Conductance testing measures the battery's actual ability to deliver current rather than just measuring resting voltage. A battery can show 12.6 volts at rest while having lost 40% of its cranking capacity due to internal plate sulfation. Replace any battery testing below 70% of rated capacity immediately rather than waiting for a no-start event. Proactive battery replacement costs $120. An emergency roadside battery replacement plus towing costs $300 minimum and strands you at the worst possible moment. Number 1. Never skip a scheduled coolant temperature. Warning ever. Every item on this list contributes to longevity. This one determines survival. The Mazda temperature gauge sits between cold and hot on every drive for a reason. It is not decoration, it is the most important instrument in the cabin. When that gauge needle moves toward hot, the aluminum cylinder head is experiencing thermal expansion beyond its engineered tolerance. Aluminum warps at sustained temperatures above 110 degrees Celsius. A warped head requires machining or replacement costing between $800 and $2,000 depending on severity. Reminds me of a subscriber named Angela. Angela drives a 2016 CX-5 for her property management business. 8 months ago, her temperature gauge climbed to 3/4 on a highway drive. She turned the air conditioning off and noticed the gauge stabilized slightly. She assumed everything was fine and continued driving 40 miles to her appointment. The head gasket failed 2 miles from her destination. Coolant entered cylinder 3 and hydraulic pressure cracked the connecting rod. The engine required complete replacement at a cost of $6,200. When the temperature gauge moves above the midpoint, pull off the road immediately and safely. Turn the engine off. Do not open the radiator cap. Allow the engine to cool for 30 minutes minimum. Check the coolant reservoir level after cooling. If the reservoir is empty, do not add cold water to a hot engine. Thermal shock from cold water entering a hot aluminum block causes immediate cracking of the cylinder head at the coolest introduction point. Call for a tow and let a mechanic identify the cause of overheating before the engine runs again under any circumstances. The automotive industry profits when your car dies young. They profit from the repair bills, the replacement vehicle financing, and the extended warranties sold on cars that should never need them. Executing these 15 habits removes you from their revenue model permanently. Your Mazda was built to last. Give it the 15 things it needs, and it will prove every skeptic wrong. Keep watching. The next video exposes exactly which Mazda parts to buy OEM and which aftermarket alternatives are genuinely acceptable. Your maintenance budget depends on knowing the difference. I will meet you there.